Always on a Tuesday night, we have a regular or special guest. And this is the first time I've actually invited my special guest on tonight. His name is Andy. He's a spiritual farmer. So a farmer, and you're going to go, what? What's the difference between a farmer and a spiritual farmer? Well, you're going to want to listen. You're going to want to know what's going on here, because this is just going to be absolutely fascinating. I'm sure that you want to look into this show to find out what it's all about. Anyway, so my name's Phil Griggs. I'm your host for the evening. If you've never joined the show before, a big welcome to you. And this is a show which embraces spirituality, people together, ideas, invokes us to question things, invokes us to seek higher inspiration in the knowledge of our wonderful universe, and also here, just when you think that Emmerdale gets interesting, you actually realise that this show's more interesting. In fact, it's a horror movie now to watch things like Emmerdale. I mean, it's worse than torture, really, isn't it? Anyway, so here we go. We're going to go and do the show tonight, and we're going to welcome on Andy in just a second. But first of all, let's give you a little intro. Now, you may not be into farming, and really, I'm not. I must be perfectly honest. In fact, the green-fingered person in the family is my wife, and so she's eagerly not just producing the show, she's listening to. Probably going to hang on to every word that Andy says as we go through the show this evening, and I'm sure you'll find it absolutely interesting, because talking to Andy over the past few weeks or so and just discussing what he does, it's just like what. All this information coming through about farming is just incredible. So if you have an allotment, if you have a garden which you enjoy growing flowers and things like this here, and your own vegetables, and even if you have a little tray of flowers on your balcony which simulates your garden, then this is the show for you. Plus the fact, I just think you'll find it interesting anyway, because he's such an interesting guy to listen to. Anyway, just to let you know, this show's going to be on for an hour. And also, just to let you know as well, what's coming on next week. Okay, this is going to be bonkers. Okay, absolutely crazy, absolutely bonkers next Tuesday. This one's going to be lively, entertaining, and probably, what? You'll go home going, did you know this? Did you know that? Anyway, so next week, I've got Jivana Das. You're going, okay, that's nice. That's nice. Anyway, just say that again. Jivana Das. He is actually a Hare Krishna devotee. We're going to be talking EFT. We're talking about his practitioner side and the resetting of the matrix. What more can we say? What more can we say? What more can we say? So I think you guys here just get ready. Now, there's an email address up here which you can see, which is partydeportet at gmail.com. This is Andy's email address. As we go through the show, this evening, that's going to be on the screen there. If ever you need to question or find out things, here, how do I grow my roses that much better so they start doing funny things, and how do I make my cider taste nicer? You're going to want to know. You're going to want to know. Okay, and good evening to everybody. Hello, Denise. Hello, Laura. Hello, Cheryl. Good evening. Hello, Helen. And, of course, the wonderful lady herself, Eleni, who's also being showing her wonderful fruit and vegetables online. Thank you very much for showing that. Anyway, I think it is about time I brought on my special guest. So I think I'd just like to welcome on Andy, the spiritual gardener, who's not far from me. He's in a little area called Portet, and I think here you'll find this an absolutely fascinating show. Now, okay, so here we go. Round of applause, please. Let's welcome on Andy. Good evening, Andy. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. For a lovely day. We've been out actually to Mondo Mar today to look at the fishes and stuff with our little boy, 2-year-old Alexander, who's had a lovely time. So yeah, it's been a fantastic day, and this is a nice way to round it off.
Brilliant. Yes, great. So, right, everybody's saying hello at the show in a minute. So, a big evening to you all. Great evening. Okay, right. So, Andy, you came out to Spain. How many years ago did you come out to Spain?
We've been here about 3.5 years now. So we came obviously from the UK. Yeah, a little bit tired of the weather and stuff in the UK. But one of the things we just wanted to get into a more relaxing lifestyle. So we hopped on a boat, as it were, and drove over from Blighty. And yeah, we've been enjoying ourselves ever since.
Okay, fantastic. And what part of the UK did you come from?
We're from Oxford originally. Well, I'm from Oxford, and my better half is from Nottingham. So
Okay. Well, they're not too far away from each other anyway. Not too that far
no,
away, are they? No. Okay, and then you came out to Spain. And was it your idea to take up farming? Do you have this revolutionary idea to think this is what you're going to do, or do you have other ideas?
no, not really. We came out. I came out as a pretty blank canvas. I used to be a wireless network engineer in the UK, so I was into IP computer networking. We kind of sold a company in the UK, and just before we came out here, and I was just sort of shooting the breeze, as it were, enjoying the sunshine. But one of the things I've always done as a bit of a relaxation is to grow my own food. And so immediately, sort of when we got out here, we did start growing food for the house. And then we got a little carried away because you've been out and you've sort of seen the land that we've got here. We got quite a bit of space, so we immediately thought to ourselves, okay, let's ramp up what we're doing personally, and maybe help out a few more friends. And then they started to tell their friends, and they started to tell their friends. So very quickly, farming was kind of, I guess, a job role that was kind of given to me in some respects. But yeah.
Okay, and then you turn this into spiritual farming. I mean, what? I've never heard of a spiritual farmer.
Yeah,
amazing.
I never went to agricultural college, obviously, so I didn't get the memo of how to be a conventional farmer. And so, of course, being an internet sort of boy or an IT-based sort of chap, I immediately started to fly into the internet and find out what the movers and shakers were saying about plants. One of the things, because I did actually go and work in some farms before I came over here, just to get a bit of practice, as it were. But one of the things that struck me about farms was the amount of effort that they put into growing things compared to how easily it appears to happen in a natural situation. So where plants are not cultivated, they always seem to be growing really well. Where plants are cultivated, there seems to be a number of problems and different management practices that need to be put into place in order to get from the beginning of a plant's life to the end. And that was always something I found rather confusing. So I kind of set about really trying to understand how it was that, say, for example, a forest system grows. So I wanted to understand how the plants were getting nutrition, how they were getting access to water, and how they were managing to keep themselves healthy without somebody like me there providing mineral-based fertilizers and irrigation and those sorts of things. So that was really the kind of start to it. It's just asking myself the question, how do things grow naturally? What are the mechanisms behind that? And then I was really, really fortunate enough to meet a couple of people who sort of took me into the world of soil biology, as it were. And that was really my first step into farming, was understanding that there's microorganisms that exist beyond our eyesight range, that actually partner up with plants to deliver life, essentially.
And one of the things which I found out from you, which I thought was actually fascinating, is that if you wanted to experience a chill out, like for instance, you're stressed, you've got a headache or anything like that, you can put your hands in the soil.
Yeah, very much so. Yeah, I mean, most of our medicine, in actual fact, comes from the soil, right? So most of our antibiotic drugs come from the soil. Most of the mind-altering drugs that we have as well, antidepressants and what have you, they all come from the soil as well. So, really for me, it wasn't a great leap to realise that actually, as I was farming, the biology that lives in the soil was modulating me on a near constant basis. And so there's certain organisms that live in the soil that secrete something called a cytokine. And a cytokine is a compound that's used in common medicine. Prozac is a really good example of a cytokine. And so cytokines actually modulate your brain wavelength and actually make you feel more at ease, which is why I guess all farmers, or mostly gardeners and the like, have like this glee kind of smile on their face most of the time. It's literally because they're breathing these organisms in, they're absorbing through their skin. They're inadvertently breathing in microorganisms which modulate and put at ease the brain's activity. And so, for me, farming is a wonderful thing for anybody who's got any kind of stress in their life, I think, because actually what we can do is mitigate a lot of that just simply by putting your hands in the soil. And that to me is incredible.
That is fascinating, that is, because when I was working in the prison service years ago, one of the things that we had there, which we wanted to try and help prisoners change their thinking, change their behaviour. And one of the things that always worked was farms and gardens, what we called farms and gardens, where they were growing tomatoes, they were growing cucumbers, they were growing peppers, they were doing the grasses, they were mowing the lawns. And these guys always just seemed to be a very happy, chilled out bunch.
Yeah, I think it's probably something that we should prescribe in all prisons or in all places where there's kind of disruptive behaviour.
Yes.
I think that actually, farming, not only are they growing their own food, and so they're getting access to a level of minerals which is pretty much you can't get that kind of level of nutrition from buying food from a supermarket. The only way you can get full nutrition from a plant actually is to grow it yourself, really, and to pull the food off as quickly as possible. And those microbes that live in the soil actually colonize the arboreal part of the plant, so the above ground part of the plant as well. So it's all over the fruit, all over the leaves, all over the stems, all over the roots, literally any part of the plant that you consume. At the same time, you're actually consuming a bunch of kind of out of your eyesight range microbiology. And this microbiology, much as it lives in symbiotic relationships with the plants in the wild, then becomes symbiont to us as well. Okay. So there's a lot of our existence that we owe to the microbes that we cultivate inside us, if we will. And actually a lot of the kind of problems I see with food are coming from the fact that the food is absent of this kind of microbiology, or that it's treated with a particular product which makes it unlikely that those that those microorganisms are going to survive inside you. And so when that happens, obviously, we start to get a breakdown in the mineral acquisition from our food.
I love this
and when we get mineral breakdown, of course, we start to get other breakdowns physiologically, mentally, or otherwise. So I think a lot of the chronic illness today stems from the fact that people are not eating enough diverse, different types of food. And when they are eating food, it's probably laced with some chemical compounds from the agrochemical industry, which are limiting the ability for those microbes to service us.
Okay.
So. Yeah.
Now that's interesting here. So, for instance, you go to your supermarket, and we're not naming any supermarket, but you buy your vegetables there off the shelf there. What's the difference between those vegetables and the vegetables that say come from your farm? You've got a big smile on your face. I'm just waiting for the explosion of.
There's many differences. I mean, not least, we looked at some tomatoes when you came to the farm the other day, and tomatoes are a really good example because when they're growing fresh on a plant, they have like a spiky appearance on the outer surface.
Yes, I noticed that.
Now, those are literally little hairs. They're called trichomes. So, and they're actually covered as well in this microbiology, and that microbiology can help us assimilate the nutrients from the tomato more efficiently when we eat it, right? So when you leave a tomato for any length of time, what happens is those dry up and break off. They snap off in effect and just drop onto the floor. And then you're eating the tomato absent of that microbiology on the surface of it. And in particular, tomatoes are a good crop because normally they pick them from the vine green in most cases, and then they ripen them using a synthetic ethylene.
Okay.
So as a tomato ripens, it releases an ethylene gas, and that speeds up the ripening process. It converts the sugars, if you will.
Okay.
But when you do that automatically, you actually or when you do that in artificial conditions, you actually take away a lot of the flavour value. So it stops producing flavour at the point at which you pick it, and then you artificially ripen it, but you're not getting the flavour because the flavour development process has been halted. So that's why people eat a lot of tasteless tomatoes when they go to the supermarket. But you still get those.
I must admit, when you taste tomato from the supermarket compared to one that's been homegrown, the difference is enormous. And obviously the goodness and the compounds that are broken down in those tomatoes is, as you say, pretty big. So we have to eat probably 3 times as much in the way of veg, or 5 times as much in the way of veg, to give us enough support there in order for us to. So
the body works on cellular feedback loops, right? So if you've got enough nutrition, then your body will send a signal. Normally, this is again related to a set of microbes that live inside your gastrointestinal tract, and they'll send a signal up your vagus nerve, which is linking your gut to your brain, and they'll say your brain will get the signal, stop eating cabbages. So of course the food industry know this lesson, and so they make food which bypasses that biological system. So this is why you can eat a packet of Mr. Kipling cakes, but you won't eat a whole cabbage. So that's the fundamental reason, is that Mr. Kipling cakes and other cakes, of course, bypass the signaling mechanism that the body gets to say you're full up. You've reached nutrient satiety. You've got all the minerals and elements that you need at that moment in time. Ergo, stop eating. And of course, in terms of people managing weight control, that's incredibly important, right?
Yes, because Mr. Kipling cakes or something like that. Actually, we can't really say the name of the cakes, but cakes in general bypass that, and just keep eating them and thinking, "Oh, this is nice. Oh, it's got fruit. This is good for me." Yeah.
But partly the body continues to consume these things because it's desperately trying to get the nutrients that it needs to get through the day.
Yes.
And so you just eat more and more and more of them. Okay. But because you haven't got that mechanism that says, all right, that's enough biscuits and cakes, stop now, Phil. You just carry on eating them. Unfortunately, that works out as an expanding waistline in the end.
Unfortunately,
and abnormalities.
I must admit, since I've eaten your vegetables here, and I don't eat cakes. We used to during the winter. We used to eat things like chocolate and things like this because it's nice with a cup of coffee or something like that, or a glass of wine. Anyway, so we used to drink that, but now just cut it all out. And I must admit, feeling and eating your vegetables, you do get the feeling here. Okay, I'm full up. But the last thing I want now is anything which is toxic to the body, like a cake or something like that. I've gone right off that. Just talking here, Emily, one of our listeners, she writes in and she says, we got our allotment. It will be 4 years this September. It has helped us not to be stressed as much, calming enjoyment, and we give out any produce to our neighbours and family. Now, I've seen pictures, Emily, of some of your crops there. So this is one lady here who's extremely happy and finds growing her own food very calming, which, as you're saying here, as soon as you put your fingers in the soil, you're picking up the bios, which is associated with medicines which help us become calm, like Prozac or something like this. Yeah. And interesting enough here, we've got Betty who says, I hate Prozac. Well, good. We'll just put your hands in soil. Just get the natural stuff. Yes. She's actually come all the way over from Alaska. She's been in a hospital for 4 months. February, March, April, May, June. 5 months. But 5 months, almost 6 months she's been in hospital for. Today is the day she's going home. So we'd just like to say a big round of applause to Betty, because I think this is fabulous news, Betty. Fabulous news. So, and it's lovely that you watched the show from your hospital bed there. But now you can watch it on your iPad at home, or you could put it through your Chromecast on your TV there and watch it on the screen, whatever you like to do. And yes, okay. So Ellie, thank you very much. Betty, thank you very much. So that's absolutely fabulous. 6 months she's been. 6 months she's been in hospital. Oh my goodness, that's a long time. But yes. And also Ellie says we get different sizes and shapes and smell, and so taste so different and yummy. That's nice. Now that's interesting. Eleni, congratulations to you. Because she actually says here that she's just come off antidepressants. And that's interesting if you're working in the gardening or you're working a lot on there. And there's probably a big helper for you. And obviously, Andy here, I think here would agree that if you're on things like this, go and do some gardening and you'll probably find that you won't need I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm not taking over the doctor's job. Definitely not.
yeah, I'm not saying stop doing medication or whatever.
Yeah.
And definitely something consult with your doctor. But for sure, like to know that most of the medication that you're taking has its origins in the soil.
Yeah.
Probably gives us an idea that we can get the access to these things without necessarily going through medical paths directly. But as I said, I mean, I'm not suggesting people stop taking medicine, and there's some really good examples of that.
Absolutely not.
But yeah, I mean, certainly if you want to get some way into relaxing, gardening is a good pastime, I think.
Yes, I think
of course, it has its immense frustrations as well when you're trying to do it on a commercial level and you're living in Spain and you get a gota fria and then you get slammed 2 weeks later with another gota fria. And that's quite a challenge and can be quite stressful. But most of the time,
that's not a wild woman, by the way, gota fria. No, that's actually a storm.
Yeah, heavy rainfall.
Heavy rainfall, very heavy rainfall. Mind you, maybe there is a woman out there called Gota Fria who provides a lot of rainfall and storms. Maybe there is. Maybe I have to invite her on the show one day. Bring on some storms there. Okay, so people, they want to grow their cabbages, they want to grow their broccoli, their peas, their runner beans. We were talking earlier about this is interesting thing here, and this is a bio preparation. So before you plant your broccoli, what is it that's got to happen to the soil that helps here? What is it that we got to do to the soil in order to help things like our plants grow? Because I didn't know anything about this. I just thought, oh, are you still there? We just froze a little bit. You'll come back on in a second. I'm sure we'll just go and jump back there in a second. Just a little freeze, Anyway, guys, so what we're talking about here just before, I'm sure we'll just come back, even if I have to call him back in a second. Yes, okay, call him back in a second. And but what we're talking about here was what we call biopreparation. And biopreparation is doing stuff to the soil before you actually seed your allotments, your garden, your little tray on your balcony. Little balcony here, how to do this. Right, I'm going to call Andy off just for a second. I'm going to go and see if I can get him back on here. Right, okay. And so this is Andy's email address there that you can see there. And I think it's just, here we go, we're back on now.
Sorry about that, mate.
That's all right, no problem at all.
Unreliable networks.
Yes.
Yeah, so I think you were asking me a question about what we do in order to kind of prepare land.
Prepare land. So people are going to go, because I would have thought here, you just dig up a bit of soil, you go down your shop, you go and get some that compost stuff, you just stick it in the ground. Then you're looking at me here saying that's a joke. You're having a joke, aren't you? and that's it. You just plant your broccoli and off you go. I mean, or your sprouts.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, depending on the plant type you're looking at. So certain plants are oxidizing plants and certain plants are reductionist plants. Now, when we're talking about that, we're talking about redox chemistry. And so what that means is some plants burn the resources of the soil, if you will, they flatten the battery. Okay. And other plants add charge to the soil. So in other words, they charge the battery. And really it depends on the type of plant that you're growing in the first instance. But if you're going to go with a brassica, a cabbage or a broccoli, for example, then we need to make sure that there's some mineral content in the soil to begin with. Sometimes we find that testing the soil is the best idea. So whenever we start, we always do a raw chemical analysis of the soil.
Okay.
So we find out what elements are in the soil and then what ones might be low. And then we try to top those up based on what we consider to be the ideal ratio of those nutrients for any specific plant. Now that sounds a lot more complicated than it actually is. But typically what you do is you go out and you take a soil sample. So you'll dig up a part of your soil. Now we do this on the same day every year. So we always pick a time in the autumn where we dig the soil up and we mark the soil on GPS. So we basically try to test the same area of soil on an annual basis, and this tells us how the soil is changing over time. But it's not enough just to test the soil, the chemical content of the soil. We need to obviously understand the biology. Because I mean, if we go back to the beginning of how plants grow, so essentially roots take up nutrients. Okay, so they're via their wood. It's via a woody interior, which we call the xylem. So that's the upward flow from the bottom of the root tip up to the tips of the plant. So the nutrients that it acquires through the root feed cell division, chlorophyll, photosynthesis, and basically we build up sugars in the plant. The plants typically build up a surplus amount of sugars, so they then take this surplus amount of sap sugar and they push it back down through the root system through something we call the phloem.
Okay.
So xylem up, phloem down.
Okay.
Now, this then leaks into the system, and every plant has its own unique signature of sap, and that attracts specific groups of microbiology. So if you like, what the plant is doing is leaking cakes and cookies into the soil profile.
Yeah, we understand that. I think we understand the way you say that.
Yeah, and microorganisms go, I really like cakes and cookies, I'm going to go there. So they run to the plant root as quickly as they can. And actually, it's these microorganisms which elaborate the nutrients from the soil system, or the compost, or the clays, or the humus. So they act as an intermediary, if you will. So they can mine parts of the soil, mine the colloidal clays for, say, iron, for example. Then they hold that about their person until a plant says, hang on a minute, mate, I really need some of your iron. How about I give you some zinc? So the microorganism says, okay, that sounds like a fair trade. I could do with some zinc. Here's some iron. So it passes iron to the plant, and the plant passes zinc to the microorganism, and everyone goes away happy.
Okay, so me, for example, my wife, Deborah, she likes planting here. She's about to go and plant her Brussels, her tomatoes. She wants to check the soil. She just got some soil from a local shop in one of those bags. Just got to open it up. What can she do to prepare the soil even more before she plants her tomatoes? Is there something that you would say here, or would you just stick tomatoes in and off you go?
You can. I mean, you can just put tomatoes into compost, and you would get a certain result in that. But what people need to kind of think about is, it'd be like if you're eating the same food every day. Like, whilst you might really like it, at the end of the day, it's not going to be particularly healthy for you in the long term. Okay. So if your favourite food, say for example, your favourite food is Brussels sprouts, and you just eat those every day, all day, there's going to be problems occurring.
They're called wind, I think.
Yeah, for sure. But I mean, certainly, like, what everything needs is diversity. In order to gain strength, things need diversity. So we can put different inputs into the compost in order to attract other groups of microorganisms. Okay. So compost tends to be selective on a group of organisms called archaea. Within that group, there are some really interesting actors, but it's only one part of the puzzle. So normally, in order to attract a lot of the mineralizers, we need to maintain a balance of clay. And normally in most compost, it's absent in clay. So if you actually think about soil, what soil is a mixture of sand, silt, clay, and organic matter, right? So the compost provides the organic matter, but it's not providing the sand, the silt, and the clay, for example.
So we need to mix the two.
Yeah, ideally for me, when I'm making my own compost, I always use a bit of soil from the field. So I dig up some soil from the field and I add that to my compost pile, and that adds in the clays, it adds in the sand and the silt and the different particles that basically provide the diet for the richest array of microorganisms.
So people then, before they go out and grow their tomatoes, they could go and get some soil, mix in some compost, just keep it there for a while, just keep it like in that state before you put the tomatoes in. Is that the idea?
Yeah, there is something that we refer to lovingly as cooking the soil, which literally means that you can get some compost and you can put in something like clay, you can put in some minerals like iron or magnesium or calcium, and actually then you just leave that for a set amount of time and it homogenizes, if you will, so it balances.
So if
Because
we
one of the
do, yeah, because most people, for instance, they're going to grow they're going to start planting their tomatoes at a certain time of year. Would you then
yeah,
suggest people do this about 3 or 4 months before?
yeah, they can do. Yeah, I mean, certainly you might not need that much time, especially in Spain where it's a little hotter and the dynamic energy in the system is a little greater, and so the metabolism is a bit faster. But certainly, yeah, there's something to be said for buying a pile of compost, chucking in a bunch of different minerals. So that could be, say, you buy a bag of volcanic rock dust or some sea minerals, and you add that to the compost pile, and then you let that give that a bit of time to settle in the pile, and then you can start using it from that point forward.
Okay.
So, but yeah,
Wow.
it's just like composting. So,
Well, okay. Now we've got some questions coming in. And guys, if you've got any
yeah.
questions out there about planting your sprouts, your greens, your cabbages, your broccoli, your whatever it is you want to go and do, whatever it is you're going to go and plant, then please ask away. But so far, this is interesting. So far, your compost, your normal compost here, it needs some soil. It needs to have some sea salts or different things or minerals, sea minerals to go in this. Plus, like seaweed, is that one of them you could add into it, for example?
Yeah, yeah, you can. Yeah, yeah. We use a lot of kelp meal here on the farm. So kelp meal is a particularly interesting product. You can also buy liquid seaweed as well if you can't get hold of kelp meal, and that's readily available on the internet. But again, it's a fantastic product. It contains an awful lot of compounds in it, and specifically with seaweed, it contains a lot of the cytokines. And so in a plant, cytokine is used for root growth.
Yeah.
So
It sounds
you have
like
a number of
Star
different.
Wars. This does. We talk about cytokines. The cytokines are
Yes,
invading. Oh my goodness, where's Luke?
it's essentially a growth hormone. So it's a plant growth hormone. But what cytokine is particularly important, especially when you're growing tomatoes, or any plant that produces any fruit, because what happens is normally when the so you have a balance of growth hormones, right? Auxin is one that makes a plant grow upwards. So
Yeah.
if you think of auxin and you think of shoots, so and if you think of cytokines and you think of roots, but normally what happens is those two conflict with each other
Okay.
inside the plant. So as the tomato plant, which looks lovely and lush, and everyone's tomato plants look absolutely fantastic until they start producing tomatoes, and then they start to go downhill from there. And
Ah,
so
right.
understand why that's happening is literally a way for you to put a program in place that allows you to mitigate it to some extent. So as the tomatoes grow on the plant, they're full of seeds, right? Because basically a tomato is just a way for the plant to distribute its seeds so
Okay.
that it can be grown elsewhere. So when that happens, the plant switches its hormone state from a cytokinin dominant, a root growth dominant situation, into a shoot growth dominant situation. Because effectively what we're doing is packing the seed with energy so that when it germinates, it pushes upwards towards the sunlight. Right? So
Okay.
it needs to have this growth hormone called auxin in it. But once auxin gets to a certain level, it clips cytokinin. So it stops the root from growing. Now, of course, when the root stops growing, what happens then is the plant uses up all the minerals and all the food that immediately surround the roots. So if your plant root is not touching fresh minerals, it won't get any. Yeah, that's the point. So if I'm a tomato plant and I've got raised auxin levels and my roots are no longer growing, then I'm not getting fresh access to minerals. When I stop getting fresh access to minerals, I stop being able to form complete proteins. Now, the proteins are, if you like, an instruction manual for the plant so that if it gets a problem, it can sequence this protein and initiate a system to recover or to mitigate.
Okay.
So when the roots stop growing, they use up all the nutrients. No nutrients are available. The plant starts to get sick. So it'll start to get blight, for example, which is a common thing. People's leaves start to brown,
Yes.
normally from the bottom upwards. And that's a sign that the plant has switched its growth hormone state into an auxin dominant state. And seaweed is a product that you can use to mitigate that process. So
Ah, there you go.
immediately
A
when
bit of
you start
seaweed.
to see, yeah. So when you start to see the flower heads appearing on a tomato plant. Every 8 days here in Spain, foliar, so spray on some liquid seaweed onto the plant every 8 days, and that'll maintain a cytokinin dominance in the plant. So it means that the plant will keep growing at a root level, and that will stop.
This is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. I mean, I'm getting into tomatoes now, and I love tomatoes to eat. They're fantastic. And your tomatoes, I mean, some of them are like that. And you can see when you look closely, you can see the tiny little hairs in them, as you're saying. And but I must admit, the best way to eat them is when you just pull it off the plant and eat it straight away, because you get those little spines on them, as you're saying. Now, several questions coming in. Deborah asks, do you follow the phases of the moon when planting?
Yeah, for sure we do. Yeah, absolutely we do. We go a little bit kind of further because we're actually planting. You guys are heavily into your astrology, so this maybe will resonate with a lot of you guys. So we plant certain things depending on the moon cycle. So we would, for example, plant fruit crops on a waxing gibbous.
Yes.
And particularly in when we're in the zone of Sagittarius.
Yes.
That'll be something that we would look to do. So if we're planting any new fruit trees or any new fruit-based crops, like even tomatoes, then that's a brilliant time to kind of do it. So we will reference a lunar calendar for that, just to make sure that we're getting it right and that we haven't forgotten our days in the cycle. But there's loads and loads of good resources on the internet for this, rather than me kind of spend hours sort of talking about it today.
Well, it's interesting. It's interesting. It's so interesting.
Yeah.
Now, actually, I think here the way you put this across, I think here is more interesting than actually trying to read it off the internet. It's just nice listening to your enthusiasm in what you've done. It's amazing. Okay, so Andy definitely used the phase of the moon depending on what particular crop it is. Now, here's an interesting question as well. Should certain veg not be planted together?
Yeah, I mean, there's certainly plants that grow well with each other and plants that grow against each other. Now, the scientific reason for that is based on organic redox chemistry. Most things are for me based on organic redox chemistry, and this is about reduction versus oxidation, and if you like, gain versus loss. And that goes back to that battery.
These guys are going to go out there now, going to talk about organic redox energy. Is that what it's called?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, it's the same. It's the same for all of us. It's basically life happens out of the chaos of redox, and actually, it's a battle between reduction and oxidation, or loss and gain. Those are the things that create order and basically give us life. So it's that dynamic relationship between our redox states that is the thing that allows the chaos to organise, as it were.
It's great to just go down the pub and look at someone and say, yeah, there's a problem with you. I think you're not you haven't got enough organic redox, whatever it is, radiation inside of you. Naturally, I felt a bit today. That's probably why.
Redox. Yeah, I mean, redox is certainly not something that most farmers will talk to you about. I can absolutely promise you. It's I think probably the single most important thing in how to understand plant life, and understanding how to put systems in place to mitigate the swings of redox. So what we're really trying to do, I mean, if you imagine the human body, when you get a foreign invader, a common cold or a virus, for example, the body moves into a state of oxidation.
Yes.
That's where it starts to accumulate excessive radical oxygen in order to disinfect a local area, right?
Okay.
So it'll raise body temperature and it'll try to cook out the pathogen, the illness, the virus, the whatever.
Which is why the nurse always says here, it's good you've got a temperature if you're fighting an illness, because that's your body's natural way of trying to fight it, even though you don't feel very well.
No, that's right, yeah. So that, and again, that's your body swinging its state of redox. So what's actually happening inside you is electrical activity versus acidification or alkalization of the body, and at various different parts. If you imagine electrical activity on a vertical graph and pH on a horizontal graph.
Yes.
And what we're trying to do is keep in the middle and slightly below the horizontal line.
Okay.
So that means that we're constantly in a state of reduction. So we're slightly acidified.
Yes.
but we're in a state of where we're accumulating electrons. So we've got plenty of battery reserves. So when you start to move into a state of oxidation, you start to burn up your body's natural battery resources.
Okay, which we don't really want to go and do. Yes.
Yeah. So if you get too many things happening at once, you just don't have the battery power to switch on other parts of the body system, which would otherwise defeat whatever problem that you've got.
Okay.
So, and that's the same for plants.
So if we're planting broccoli and sprouts together, do they go well, for instance? Which veg would you say goes well, and which ones would you say avoid growing these two together?
There's quite a lot of companion. So we call them companion plants that grow together.
Okay.
So for example, we grow sweet corn or maize on the farm, and we do that in partnership with soy. Now, soy is a legume or a nitrogen fixing plant. So it takes atmospheric nitrogen. So for every square foot of farm soil, there's about 3/4 of a ton of available nitrogen. So
that's a lot.
In the air, 78% of our atmosphere is nitrogen.
Yes.
Right? So above all parts of the ground, every about foot squared is about 3/4 of a ton of available nitrogen. But the problem is, how do we get the inert nitrogen from the atmosphere into the soil in a format that a plant can digest?
Okay.
So we use certain microorganisms to do that, nitrogen fixing microorganisms, and one of those is something called a rhizobacteria, and a rhizobacteria associates in particular with a leguminous plant. So if someone says to you, oh, it's a legume, then that's a nitrogen fixing plant. It's something that associates specifically with microbiology, which are specialists at taking the biology out of the air and converting it into energy for plants and food for plants.
So are there plants that would work together with this, that actually bring this nitrogen in, which then feeds a different type of plant? For instance, you're talking about maize and you're talking about soy. When we're growing our English veg, for instance, because there's not many people in England. Oh, well, yeah, there is maize out there, isn't there? They do grow sweet corn. But when you're doing your allotment then, you're growing your tomatoes and you've got your cucumbers and you've got everything else. Yeah. Which ones would you say, plant those next to that one and plant that next to that one, because the two will be supportive of each other? Is there?
Yeah. So there's what we determine to be synergistic stacks. So this is where 1 + 1 no longer really equals 2, but rather 11, as it were.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea.
Yeah. So what we're doing is we're trying to partner up plants that have characteristics that can be shared with plants that are slightly less efficient in certain areas.
Okay.
So some plants are really good at getting hold of silicon. Some plants are really good at getting hold of calcium. Some are really good at getting hold of nitrogen. Some are good at phosphorus acquisition. And so what we need to do is work out what plants out of those groups. And there's loads of resources online that will give you a good example of what companion plants are and which ones to plant alongside stuff. So, for example, we always plant basil with tomatoes, and we also plant something called Calendula officinalis. So calendula, both an edible flower and a brilliant thing for making skin creams as well. But one of the things that calendula does is it secretes a compound through the root system, which deters a root-eating nematode. So it pushes away potentially hazardous micro-worms that live in the soil that would otherwise be grazing on our tomato roots all day.
Okay.
Yeah, so the calendula pushes that away. Above the ground, we use basil, and basil has a lot of scent to it and a lot of aroma.
It's beautiful smell, isn't it?
Yeah, so that'll deter things like flea beetle, spider mite, some of the some of the insects that will go on the above ground parts of the plant. So basically, so we've planted a tomato, but equally we've planted calendula and we've planted basil. Now, all three of those plants we can use from a dietary point of view. So actually, you're not wasting any space by doing it either. So, but it's definitely something that we look at quite a lot. And actually, I've got a small farm in Estonia, which all we do is we grow things that are biodynamic accumulators. So we grow things like dandelion, we grow horsetail, we grow like comfrey, hundreds of different plants, stinging nettles, for example.
That's interesting, because a lot of those elements there you're talking about, your farm in Estonia, are elements that would actually help the body with medical astrology. Because dandelion is exceptionally good, along with natural licorice, along with some of the other plants that you're actually saying, to use some of those to balance out the body. When you're feeling sluggish, you need something more fire. Or if you've got too much water, you need a bit more earth. Earth-based plants or earth-based vegetables, which I'd love to show with you about later on in the year. And to talk about this and be to help people see the differences between their health and what they could actually do to change this. But your normal vegetables, so say with your broccoli, is there, and actually one of the questions that comes through, what is a natural alternative to stop green fly? Well, you don't have to spray that stuff on, because I remember you saying yesterday, if you spray these chemicals on, it's naturally going to attract a bug a mile away.
Yeah, so basically one of the things that we try to avoid on our farm is feeding nitrogen-based fertilizer, because we know that 78% of the atmosphere is made up of nitrogen, and anyone that looks outside their window now and sees any plants that are uncultivated but are green know that those plants have an association and relationship with nitrogen. So they're able to acquire nitrogen, right? So for us as farmers now, the important thing is to understand, how does nature acquire nitrogen, and can we apply that to our farm soils? So certainly we do. I mean, crop rotation is about that same thing. If you plant a plant like a tomato and it eats the resources of the soil, we follow that with a pea plant, for example, and that puts the energy back into the soil. So, and this is again why crop rotation happens. It's literally to do with some plants take energy out of the system, some plants put it back, and we need to understand which ones we need to work with at any one time, and that's very much dependent on where you live as well. So I can make recommendations for people here in Spain, but they totally wouldn't be appropriate in the UK. But there would be other plants in the UK that would do the same job.
So they can email you then and just ask you those sort of questions with the email on.
Sure.
So, for instance, you've got your I don't know, maybe your broccoli's got green fly on it, or your greens have got green fly on it.
Yeah.
How are you going to get, what sort of plants could you do, or what sort of natural stuff could you use, which is not going to attract more bugs?
Well, the thing to do in the first instance is understand why you're getting the insect. So if you've got an aphid, for example, on your tomato plant, then the aphid is bringing a message to you. So, and it's up to you as a farmer to understand what the insect is, and therefore what the message, what the data is that insect is trying to convey to you about your system. So aphids only exist on plants that are volatilizing excess levels of nitrogen. So one of the key things about insects is that they see in the infrared. So when plants are exhibiting excessive amounts of nitrogen, they glow up, if you will, like a big fat neon sign, with a big arrow on it, and underneath in big letters it says "eat." And it's pointing to your plant, and the reason is that aphids are an insect. All of these things are in effect garbage collectors, if you will. So if you're growing a plant that's volatilizing nitrogen, aphids move into the system, they bite your plant, the leaves fall off, the plant then has to use excessive amounts of nitrogen again in order to grow new leaves, and that pares down the overall nitrogen in the system. But if you don't want to get the insect in the first place, it's about understanding what form to feed your plant with.
So the layman out here, they're trying to understand, well, what is a layman form? What could they put on their soil in the first place? Like, would it be tea, for instance? Would it be coffee? Would it be coffee granules? Would that help? Would that stop the nitrogen? Is there something there?
Everything's got a carbon to nitrogen ratio. So if you've got excessive amounts of nitrogen in the system, then you need to up the amount of carbon that you have in the system in order to mitigate excessive nitrogen.
So,
that
could
using
that be?
something like biochar.
Would that be like charcoal or something like that? Could you use
Yeah,
that?
charcoal, but more you're really looking at something that's pyrolyzed. So if you like, it's like oven baked rather than burnt directly with a flame. You want something that's basically dry baked, like when you put food in the oven. So we get something here called biochar. You can buy it all over the world, biochar, or you can make it yourself. It's really easy. Again, there's loads of videos on YouTube which show you how to do that. Effectively, it's like a container in a container, and you light the fire underneath the outside container, but the wood material or the organic material that you want to carbonize is in the middle, and the wood pyrolyzes, which burns off all the steam and the oils. So the difference between biochar and charcoal is that charcoal still contains an element of oil, because obviously you want it to burn.
So say, for instance, you burnt your toast.
Yeah.
And you got that black stuff, which is carbon, isn't it? Can you scrape that off and then put that on your soil?
Yeah, you could do. Yeah, there'd be no reason why you couldn't do that.
And that could stop your green fly.
What would stop green fly is understanding what you're doing to attract the green fly in the first place.
Yeah,
so compost is
a
really good case in point, because you can buy compost, but compost in a lot of cases is relatively unbalanced. And so when you put it on the plant, it converts to excessive levels of nitrogen, and then the excessive nitrogen is volatilized out of the leaf, and the insects, of course, see that as an infrared signal pump, and they follow it, and they can see this from up to 1,600 meters, which is close to a mile
away, isn't it? For a bug, a tiny little bug that big, to go and see that plant giving off extra nitrogen like that red colour in the infrared. Okay, what about a natural? So we often go down the shops and they say, "Oh, spray this stuff on your roses, on your plants, on your vegetables to kill off the green fly," which is then going, "Oh my God, this has got chemicals in it." What could you use, which is a natural thing to be able to get to kill off the?
So most insects actually don't like seaweed. So if you're applying seaweed to your plant, then most of the insects are going to leave almost immediately.
Okay.
I mean, again, one of the things with seaweed is it doesn't contain large amounts of nitrogen. So nitrogen is in a couple of different forms, right? Most of the time when you buy fertilizer from the shop, that'll either be a plus charged form of nitrogen, i.e. ammonia nitrate, which is chemically NH4 plus, or it'll be nitrate nitrogen, which is a negative form of nitrogen, and that is NO3 minus. If you look at it,
okay.
So most plants prefer ammonia forms of nitrogen, positively charged forms of nitrogen. If you're going to go for a fertilizer, that's the one to go for. The reason is plant roots are negatively charged in most instances. So in order to get a positive and a negative will just bind together really easy. There's no payment to be made on either side.
Okay.
But normally what happens is we engage in practices which oxidize the soil. So we dig it up all the time, we're always tilling it. We always apply fertilizers and stuff, which again introduce high amounts of oxygen into the system. And this converts the ammonia nitrate, so the positively charged nitrate, takes off the hydrogen, replaces it with an oxygen, and it becomes negatively charged.
Okay.
So then the plants are in a situation where they're negative themselves and they have to try to consume some negative food. So if you can imagine, that's not an easy process.
No.
So the plant then has to fabricate a special protein in order to absorb the food in its negative state. So when it's doing this, it's diverted its attention away from other aspects, and those could be managing the plant from a heat perspective, managing water loss, managing insect predation. None of those things are kind of available while the plant is diverting all its energy into converting its food into something that it can later eat. Okay. It's like me, if I tried to shove a whole turkey in your mouth in one go, you would quickly reject it.
I'll be going fucking mad.
If we chop it up into smaller pieces, it might be something that you can process.
Yeah.
So
Okay. We've also got other questions coming up here. Now, you make organic soap.
Yeah, we do. Yeah.
And that's made with olive oil. Is that right?
It is. Yeah. Yeah. Nothing but olive oil, and uncarboxylated as well. So normally when you get olive oil soap, is made out of olive oil that's already been used for cooking. So one of the things I was really keen on was not to smell like last night's dinner after I've had a shower. So we use an uncarboxylated olive oil, and we make that in a standard way for soap using bicarb and various different.
Because I used that last night because you gave me a bath to take home with, and I must admit, as soon as I started washing my hands with it, it had like a lovely silky feel to it, which you don't normally get with other soaps. They dry out your hands really quick, but this is like this is a silky feel to this soap.
Yeah.
So
again,
guys,
on the outside of your skin, you'll have a bunch of microbes living on you, mostly trichoderma and yeast and other associative bacteria that come in partnership with those. But those microorganisms are living on us. That they're our first line of defence, if you will. So if you put your hand in something that's a bit sloppy, those microorganisms effectively can detoxify that. But if we're using harsh soaps made from chemical inputs, again that soap burns the microorganisms that are on your skin. But part of the suppleness of your skin and the oiliness of your skin comes from these microorganisms. So if we remove them, of course, your skin immediately starts to dry out and lose integrity.
Okay. And also you make deodorants.
We do. Yeah, we make organic deodorants as well. Again,
I tried this last night, and it's a lovely smell. It's a lovely, lovely smell. And most of these organic things you get across here, I mean, I'm normally used to like Sure or Gillette Right God or something like that. And you spray stuff on, but you've got high levels of aluminium in those things, haven't you? But this natural stuff, what I was amazed about is I put it on, and it feels nice on you. But during going through the day, you think, oh my God, I'm going to honk because you haven't used like a Sure. But actually, no, it's all right. It's quite nice. I mean, no one's complained so far. I mean, the dog hasn't said anything.
It's not a deodorant that will stop you from sweating, so you will still sweat, which is a good thing. We don't want stuff to stop you sweating, and some of the artificial deodorants that are used actually stop you from sweating, and that's danger, really, because we sweat because we need to get rid of excessive heat. That's part of us balancing our physiology amongst the dynamic environment. And so if we can't use these tools, then we'll start to get other breakdowns occurring.
I think it's so interesting is to be more organic and live like this. I mean, I've just been so educated in the past few days about this. I just think it's fantastic. You've also got a fan of your chapsticks. The chapsticks for lips are just amazing. Thank you, because Deborah's using it. Actually thought, wow, that is just incredible. Ellie says, my granddad back in Cyprus worked at a pure green olive soap factory. So that's interesting. Brilliant. Thank you very much. And yes, the olive oil soap is just amazing. You just get such a nice feel on your skin. You just want to use this as a thing all day. We always buy a lot of olive oil soap and bring it back to the UK. No wonder you look so well, Elodie. No wonder. Oh my goodness, this has been absolutely fascinating. I must admit, through farming there. Just to ask so people understand this. And you're growing a run of beans. What plants should they grow with it to enhance the runner beans? Is there a two plants you should grow together which are advisable? I know you're saying about tomatoes and basil. Is there anything else here?
Yeah, I mean there's quite a lot of focus that we've taken from kind of Native American Indians and Native South American Indians. And something called the Three Sisters planting method. So if you're planting a bean, we can plant again some corn or you're basically planting three plants together, and that's to capitalise on space because you're growing both vertically and horizontally, but also each of those plants bring something to the table which benefit each other. So they become dynamic accumulators or synergistic stacks, if you will.
Bioaccumulators is fantastic. I love these words. Words. When I go out and call people these things tonight, when I go and chat to them later, you're not bioaccumulating.
No, there's loads of really interesting things. I mean, dandelion, we were talking about dandelion earlier. Dandelion we use to remove obstruction.
Yes.
So it's the same as it is in people. So if you've got a blockage in the liver, then dandelion is a really good product for that. And again, in plants, it does the same thing. It's also great for colic, by the way, if anyone's got young kids or whatever.
Which is
and they
the
want
air
to get,
system, isn't it? Which is
that's right.
the element of air. The element of air, you need a lot of dandelion, and to remove things like this. And it's interesting. Part of the, if you're an air sign especially like your Libra, and Aquarian, or Gemini, then maybe this is something which helps you, or you got a lot of air in your charts. That's great. Okay, so would you
But also,
plant beans, peas, runner beans together?
no,
Okay,
no.
that's
I
what you
won't.
want to know.
I won't. I won't put peas and beans together. I'd put them in separate rows.
Okay,
But and the reason is because they're all what we call reductionist plants. So when we go back to our redox chemistry, reduction plants are the ones that put electrons into the soil, right? So if you're putting too many of those into the soil, technically what we're doing is we're removing the oxygen and we're over producing hydrogen. So
right. Okay.
when you get to a point at which your oxygen levels are too low, of course you're going to suffocate.
Okay.
So we need to get a balance of plants that are both oxidizing and reducing, and grow those together. And that's
What
the
I
real.
think we'll do for the next show, which will be a bit later on in the year, is we'll come back and we'll work with plants which work with the elements, and
Yeah,
also work with ones that work together,
yeah,
harmonize together. Which and also because a lot of people are vegetarian, but they don't lose weight because they're eating too too many vegetables which aren't working well together, and
no,
that
yeah, I agree.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
interesting.
There's something that people can look at really quickly. It's called Mulder's chart. Now, Mulder's chart shows elements in plants specifically, and how certain elements are antagonists
Okay.
or certain plants are assimilators. So they either
Mulder's
help.
chart. Is that Moul?
Mulders, as
Yeah.
in Mulder and Scully.
Okay.
Yeah,
Mulders.
that's it. Yeah, Mulder's chart, and
Mulder's
that
chart.
basically
Okay.
shows you on a sphere the 17 or so elements related to photosynthesis, and which ones of them antagonize or otherwise. So which ones you don't want to put together in a mix and then put on your plants, which ones you can mix together successfully.
That's
So
going to be very interesting. Mulder's charts. Yes, I'm going to look up that, and we can have a good discussion about that coming later on the year. And work with medical astrology and your experience with spiritual farming, how to do this here. And I think this is wow. There are so many questions, and yet the hour just flown by. So, but Andy, I just want to say here, thank you so much. If you've got questions for Andy, I know some of you are asking here, where can you buy products from? If you want to email Andy, by all means do. He will be more than happy to help you. Happy to help you. There's his email address, partydeportet@gmail.com. And
so we have
yes,
got a website as well for Better Organics if people want to have a look at that, which
Better
is
Organics.
just www.better, obviously as in the word better, and then
BetterOrganics.com. Okay,
rather than a C at the end, it's an X. So it's organics with an X.
Okay,
So
okay. I'm going to look at this.
ORGNIX.
Organics with an X at the end or a C, you say?
Instead of the C, it's an X at the end, yeah. So it's betterorganics.com.
Brilliant. I've got so many overlays coming up here. There we go. I'll put that above me. There you go. Betterorganics.com. Is that right? Betterorganics.com.
Yeah, that's right. So and there you can buy biostimulants and also biology. So we make a bunch of stuff, root associative fungus and related microorganisms. Those microorganisms are the ones that solubilize or make available the mineral part of the equation of life. So anyone that knows anything about plants, when they bring in sunlight energy, they basically are converting into sugars. They bind those simple sugars together and they bookend it with a metal cofactor, a mineral cofactor, so magnesium or iron or copper or manganese. And actually they form proteins, and those proteins unlock certain aspects of the plant's life cycle. So manganese being a prime example, if a plant doesn't have access to manganese, it can't split water.
Okay.
So
right. There you go. So much information. I've learned so much here. Just
Yeah.
absolutely mind blowing. Andy, this has been absolutely fascinating. Thank you so much for coming on tonight.
You're
And
Yeah, you're very.
I know people, we've got people here from New York. We've got people here from other parts of America. We've got England. We've got Belgium. And we've also got the UK. So people from all over the place. So I'm just absolutely thrilled. I know that people want to come back and watch this show again from different parts who are fast asleep at the moment because they're the wrong end of the world. Or they're just getting up and just saying, right, okay. But anyway, Andy, thank you. Thank you very much indeed, and a big hoot from us.
Thank you.
So have a great evening to you, and warm wishes to Natalie and your son there. Just have a fabulous evening, and we'll see you soon. We'll book you up again very soon. Tomorrow morning, guys, I'm on with Guillaume doing an astrology show. That's on 11 o'clock in the morning, which is Spain time, 10 o'clock UK. See you guys then. And yes, what I'll do is I'll put the info in a Cafe Clairvoyance group. That's from Deborah. And just to say, Andy, thank you very much once again for an absolutely fabulous show. And we really appreciate you. And yes, if any benefits come off you from the show, then that's absolutely fabulous. And we'll push it out there anyway.
Yeah, and anyone got any questions, then obviously they've got my email. So if I don't get to it straight away, I will get to you, I promise.
Andy, thank you very much. Take care. Have a lovely evening and see you soon, my friend. Take care.
Good
night.
See you soon, mate. Cheers. Bye-bye now. Bye.